biennial live event of Everyday Digital, BLEED, which is a biennial live event. Initially presented by Arts House Melbourne and Campbelltown Arts Center in Campbelltown, Sydney, as a digital art festival or project and initiative. And then the second edition in the 2022, this year, Taipei Performing Arts Center together with the MoCA, Museum of Contemporary Art Taipei, are pleased to co-present and join the presenting team with the support of the Ministry of Culture, Taiwan. So under this framework, the Taipei Performing Arts Center is presenting Paeonia Drive as the IRL live premiere after their 4-year trajectory of collaboration. Additionally, we are also presenting next week an online cinematic performance project called Thank You Movie God by the choreographer and new media artist Su Wenqi. And even though it's an online event, but it's ticketed. So please support the artists and us and get your ticket for next week's online screening event. Yeah, and so within this framework, this post-performance talk is at the same time live streaming via the BLEED.net, the official website of the BLEED. So in this way that audiences or friends in Australia and beyond that could join with us. This is Angela Go, dancer choreographer from Sydney. Su Yu-Hsin, visual artist, filmmaker from Taiwan, based in Berlin. So actually they have been through the quarantine to be able to work together and meet together physically again. And then we have the special guest, Hong-John. I guess, because I saw Hong-John was like taking notes quite a lot. Yeah, I do believe that Hong-John has got many thoughts to share or to question or comments or. But before that, I guess I would like to invite maybe Yu-Hsin and Ange. Would you like to respectively describe a little bit like how has the process looked like and what have you been through by doing this project? Because they met at the beginning 2018 at the initiative of TPAC called ADAM, Asia Discovers Asia Meeting for Contemporary Performance. So they were participating in the residency program called ADAM Artist Lab, where they met and started to collaborate and initiate this idea of Paeonia Drive. And then the pandemic hit the earth. And so, yeah. So in 2020, they sort of like transmute the entire project, not in the way of turning performance online, but literally because the notion and the entity of internet and digital culture is central in their practices and research and this project. So 2020, they presented Paeonia Drive as a online art work. And then this year, being able to present a IL edition. Yeah. Sue?
Thank you, River, for the introduction, and it's nice to have Hong-John with us. Yeah, it's quite hard to summarize like 4 years process. But yeah, I just remember when we arrived here in the studio, and then yeah, it actually didn't take yeah, I remember that impression. Me and Ange met in the studio, and it felt really strange. It felt like we didn't disconnect in the past 4 years, but now our body finally meet in one space. Yeah, so yeah, actually during the past 2 years, I was in Berlin and Ange was in Sydney. We still work remotely through like, yeah, all the video conferencing technology we have so far. Yeah, and then we work through like the edition in online with the Paeonia Drive, our 360-degree website and desktop performance. And yeah, and now finally here we are in the same studio. And yeah, we actually just embodied also those past experience in the 2 years online, and those kind of delay moment or embodiment, that kind of like, yeah, the transmission bodily experience also in this edition. That's my like first thought about to respond to the question.
Yes, thanks, River, for the introduction and the support. Yeah, there's not much more to add. I think, yeah, we, like River said, we met in 2018. Since then, there's been different stages of development in under different conditions, sometimes together in fleshy together, and other times through the screen. And but actually, I think we stayed connected because we were really still sharing many ideas and thinking, whilst both also doing separate works, but kind of following each other's other works and weaving in conversation. And yeah, so we met here, and again, yeah, we saw each other and we thought, oh, hi. It hasn't been a long time or something. It didn't feel like we were disconnected, yeah.
Yeah, when I finally saw this work like last week, when they were doing rehearsal, I was invited to be here. And I was quite surprised because they really made the entire studio room. Well, literally the studio is already queer enough because, like, imagine this is a theater facility of Taipei Performing Arts Center, and normally in a theater setting, studios are dark, black floor, black wall, everything is black, and here it's like, oh, cute. and also have like such a large scale of the French window, and not a flat one, but a curved one. And also this kind of exposed entity of the architectural condition together, I guess, shape this studio space a little bit different than usual ones. But the two artists managed also to transform the entire room as a installation work. So it is very interesting for me to feel and to see like we are in the internal space of an installation, but at the same time, because of this green filter that suddenly the boundary between like we perhaps is in front of a screen or inside of a screen, and this real-time city landscape at the same time has become quite surreal. So with this natural condition, together facilitates Paeonia Drive's idea, or sort of like very beginning questioning about the human relations with technology and in the everyday life experiences, and as well as how the tension or the subtlety between the human body and the body of digital settings. Yeah, so it has become like integrating everything into an installation. And because of studio, that mural is existing there. And then they feel not enough, so they also, install all this, like we are surrounded by these multi screens. Yeah. 那我觉得我上个礼拜在这边看他们的排练的时候，我非常的惊讶，因为我意识到我们在这一个被他们布局成装置的一个房间里面，那这个装置很有趣的地方是，他们运用了这一个排练场原来的一种条件，然后再加上这一个真实时间的自然的景色，然后透过这样的一个滤镜式的去重新规划它，那整个空间包括这些他们特别在调度过来的镜子和这些荧幕，它整体形塑了一个他们这个作品里面的一种环境上面的思考的出发点，就是关于我们怎么样生活在这个包围我们的这些多重的荧幕、多重的 screen， 也包括这些镜子。
Yeah, I would say also that my ear. All the materials that we installed, like the mirrors, the filter. I mean, we're kind of using the window and the CCTV, the monitor, the phone. They're all things that that do the same thing as screens, like in that they reflect, they simulate, they separate, they change. They're a physical interface, but I think a lot of the things we're doing do all those actions but aren't screens. And so the work maybe has a sense like everything feels like we're in a very fragmented, reflective sort of space that produces these simulations, but actually a lot of the materials we're using are quite simple in a way, but have the effect of this like feeling of screen or digital something. And then they produce these kind of glitches, but they're actually analog glitches or performance glitches in that they're not digital. I mean, of course, the video is like digital, but in terms of how we kind of can fragment the images of the space, yeah, I think we're trying to do that in a way that sort of simulates that, but is sort of a bit uncanny because it's really solid, actual materials.
Yeah, so it's like really in the space you can sense, you can see like what kind of material it is, and also like this wave glass from Taipei Performing Arts Center, and that is also the sample of the glass from the building. So yeah, we arrived here like 3 weeks ago, and then we start to think how to manage the space. And so this is part, like actually every part of the installation is part of consideration. And what I just want to add, like what Ange say, that the screen-like stimulation of like, and also I think there's different touches, like different kind of touch we try to do with like sense of seeing, or this like really it seems like real-time streaming of the image, but then it's really like this experience of video conferencing. You see someone on the screen, you can feel it, you can, it's really, I don't, it's really hard to describe, but we are trying to articulate that with all this material you can sense in the space. So we also invite people to walk around, to move around the space, so have some time to situate themselves in the space we install, and then we kind of activate that throughout the sessions.
Yeah, and then and people, which I think was sort of quite on display in this performance in particular, that people kind of sort of exist inside the work, and actually they are, you know, it's not participatory per se, but people are participating because they're constantly finding their own frame, and often, like, you know, of course through a phone or a different camera, and so people are kind of it's actually people are really interacting with the space, but actually through like their own exploration of what is the image and what frame do I choose.
I do agree. Well, actually, well, just now I was just doing a performance, pretending I'm writing, like jotting down notes. Well, the piece itself is well. This is the first time I look at this piece, and that well, quite striking. It plays on the idea of a dictatorship of a spectator. The spectator, as Angie just mentioned, spectator came into this performative installation. How should I say? A performative installation of image and with the different various type of camera, and immediately that we are trapped inside the logic of scenes, seen through different mediations. You know, CCTV, right? And what a camera. We also have a cameraman going on with that, and with a performance, with a performer holding camera. So all sorts of different camera showing image here, and then of course the spectators can choose their own frame to look at. And I would say, you know, that this installation, this performative installation, actually composes different ways of looking. And of course, there's something missing here. It's about the topic, the garden, right? As actually is being mentioned over and over again. And the garden, I would think, I would say it's quite related to the digital mediation of space. It's more or less, I'm thinking in that direction. Part of it is because of the image that we saw, and also this Angie's image is being digitally manipulated and become fractal, and all of this accrue, make me believe that that's a kind of a digital technology space that you're trying to refer to. And of course, today's this digital space is much coded in power. I think one of few sentences that you throw upon on the screen is really a critique upon this. And the problem for me is actually how we situate ourselves in this technology digital space, and how do we form our subjectivity. I think this kind of the whole issue of subjectivity that deal with the idea of looking. Of course, we have a lot of immediate answer, you know, such as we can look at, for example, like Jacques Lacan, the famous French psychoanalyst, refers to the notion of you know, the mirror stage, right? But yet, at this in this piece, this mirror stage has been transformed or turned into the digital technology manipulated a sphere, which is pretty much it's not only in our public space, but also in our private space. That's become, as River just mentioned, become like our everyday reality. We are part of it. There's no way out. I think a few sentences that in the video is also talking about that we are trapped inside, and we have no way to look from outside because we are just a part of it. So well, that's what I'm coming out that with all this crew and trying to decipher all of this. And I think one of the key elements that I think is really interesting, and also, of course, that also refers to the Lacan's article that I just mentioned. You know, actually, in Lacan's life, he hasn't done many pieces of writing. Most of his writing has been done by his son-in-law, but this piece of writing, you know, the mirror stage as a formation of I, that's actually done by him, one of his early writing. And he refers to, of course, we all kind of know this the idea of a mirror stage, you know, which is like, you know, a baby know himself, you know, the whole notion of self-conscious actually developed from the apprehension of the image in the mirror, which is the baby himself or herself. That's the idea of a mirror stage. And within the article, Lacan mentioned that you know, this situation of the oneself with the other, that is a surrounding in an arena, which when I look at this piece, you know, this metaphor of garden, that make me. Well, I keep on thinking about this, you know, back and forth between Lacan's writing and this piece here. But yeah, and I also wonder about well, the crew that I lead into this, you know, the title of this piece, Paeonia Drive. How does it come out? So. I would like to hear from you guys.
I think, should we talk about garden and then we can talk about title? Might make sense.
Yeah.
So,
I think that you use some interesting words. You used this word manipulation and mediation, right. And I think the initial kind of idea around the garden, that's this sort of this starting point of our research, and then the work kind of, you know, sort of like a weed kind of grew out of the garden and escaped the garden as a kind of central thing. But now I think it's kind of come, for me, I think it's come right back around where actually if you think about what a garden is, it's a manipulation of something that would otherwise be wild. Or a kind of mediation, one could say, of something that would otherwise be growing in a wild way. And so a garden is kind of, has these elements of control and patterning, and also situating the person in the garden. So is a garden, you know, is it made to be sat inside, or is it made to be looked at from maybe above? And it has these sort of planes of geometry. And I think, yeah, for me, the garden, we tried to let go of it a bit, and then I think actually it's very present actually, because it refers to this, a very particular kind of manipulation or mediation or control. And also, you mentioned a word a couple of times, the word clue. And it reminds me of one of my favorite stories, which is Borges's Garden of Forking Paths. And actually, in there, there's this beautiful line saying, if you omit the one thing that you're talking about, actually that's the clue. And so the garden isn't here, but there's all these clues about it. And so I think it anyway points, or it's through the mirror back to the garden or something. And that feels to me somehow nice, I think.
Yeah, I think just maybe at one part of thinking of the garden, I think at this stage also, like, we start from there as also like how a garden have been constructed, or the infrastructure of the garden, and also like different from different culture, how they design the garden, and what is the garden's its relation to nature, and how like garden could be the miniature of the nature or extension of the from the domestic to the nature, or this interface of like home and nature. And so we also like think, like, of course we in the research process we read or we look at how garden, its relation, and also gardening as a human technique to control nature, or to take nature or borrow nature in the house.
Borrowing is a good word.
Yeah, so it's just so so from the research process, and then in the work in the studio, and yeah, I think what Hong-John mentioned is like this relation of, yeah, I think seeing or being seen, or no place to escape, and then this establish the pattern through, yeah, I would say it could be repetition, and it could be certain perspective, or the guidance of use the eyesight to guide how you see the scenery. Yeah, so that's kind of different perspective for us to approach garden. Then, yeah, I think actually for me it's like, until we back in working in studio, actually the garden is really in a virtual space. Like, we are through our choreography to guiding people to see and invite them in this garden, and also it's a part of the construction of our virtual garden.
We're really like landscaping the pathways for people, and yeah, somehow, yeah, that's present in the patterning, I think, more than...
Yeah, so actually it's, from
It's
garden to the patterning.
Yeah, it's
or
like...
recognize the patterning, through recognize the pattern.
Yeah, I think
to find
maybe...
the entry to a virtual space. Yeah.
We're using it in terms of course, like metaphorically, but we're using it more so, I just had this thought, tell me if it's wrong, that the garden is something about, we use it as a way to pattern space, not as a representation, because we don't have like pot plants or anything.
I guess maybe could you share with us a little bit more, like, what's the in the reference, the vision of garden? Like, you see the action of gardening, taking care of gardens in relation to the entity of organism, and what's the connection for organism?
Yeah, I think it's much back to the point of what Ange just referenced, is like gardening as a technique. And it's like, there's, of course, we domesticize those plants in the gardens, and also gardening to see in this way of keep things in the place where it's designed to be, and to keep the shape of what it should look like at all the time. So it's like, we can say that we see gardening as a way of control. Yeah, and then gardener's vision is this way of gardener enter the garden doing this daily work of keeping things in shape. And that also one part is like doing the residency in Australia, and I saw the sign of garden escape. That's how we also relate that actually like those plants like could just grow wild and outside of the design, like the like how gardener design it should be. Yeah, so I just quick reference, but and
Yeah, I think early on we were looking at these terms like creepers, or like there's different terminology for plants that kind of grow outside of the sort of shapes of the garden, but there's also then like to consider also the introduction of a species of plant that will kind of take over the indigenous plants, and this kind of like that the plants also kind of have these colonizing effects, and plants from elsewhere that are put in, or like noxious kind of weeds that will take over, and the job of the gardener is, I mean, because one could say like a weed is still a plant, but it's maybe not the one that you want there. So the gardener has to do this job, and the gardener has, in the text, we refer to this term called the gardener's vision. And so the gardener is like looking at something, and the weed doesn't have to die because of what it is, but because of what it's not. And we were reading this kind of this relationship between gardener's vision and kind of this like the compilation of data sets for facial recognition, and how that these like how the different algorithmic things are algorithmic regimes are sort of used to separate and categorize, and they often impose their own kind of violent sort of outcomes.
Yes, yeah, totally agree. And I see, I think somewhere down the line you mentioned that we are the gardener. So it's not only you two, the performers that are gardener, but all the participant here, as also part of this gardener of the digital artificial nature garden. This is something that I think that I'm coming up with. Yeah. Yes. I think you also mentioned that a garden is not nature, so it's artificial. And a garden is a representation of power, and I think yeah, that's that pretty much refers to the media landscape that we are having now. Yeah. So I think it's if we try to look at the piece from the psychoanalytic point of view, and I think it's very interesting that in Lacan's idea that he mentioned that it's kind of a reflexive passive stance that is pretty much endowed with all this meaning of a subjectivity. So if I can present it, it would be like I know myself being looked at. So that's a reflexive passive. And I think that situation pretty much reflect back to your performance. I think the movement and also the way you handle the camera, and also composed in the image. All of this refers to this kind of a passive reflexive stance of looking. So I was, I'm really curious about what you thought about that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's really, yeah, the interesting point, sorry, my mouth. And yeah, I think it's this relation of, like what I just mentioned, like see and being seen, and this subject-object relation, and how it actually shifting all the time or transform all the time, because like I think that's really interesting for us to, of course, have this installations, like we install this space and with mirrors, and also like this tension between us and the audience, and also sometimes they see us through the camera. Yeah, so that actually is like they are seeing us through camera, but also at the same time they are seeing us through like all these reflections. And then when we are approaching, and also like they are hard to see our eyes, and then this shifting, I think for me is much interesting in this transformation of the subject-object relations, and also as you mentioned, this reflexive moment. Yeah, yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah, and I mean, actually performing the work is still an experiment for us, because every time
we're also
is
observing
different.
at the same time.
Yeah, and where we can see, we're like curious about how people will behave. And then I had a question actually, like during this performance, I was like, who are the performers when everybody can be seen? And when everybody is like being sort of moved in the space. Of course, we're the performers because we sort of know what's going on. But there is this question about, yeah, when you see yourself and you know that other people can also see you, and then, yeah, we're the performers, but also suddenly everyone begins to perform because they know that they are being watched by us, but also by the other audience members. Yeah.
That's how I see this, accidental or subconsciously designed protocol of the spectatorship is literally part of this work, because it's being integrated into this multi-interrelations of, like mediating what's inside, what's outside, what's seeing, what's being seen, what's manipulating, and what's manipulated. So it's all integrated or intertwined for me. Yeah.
So go back to this. So go back to this idea of being look at, the being look atness. Just suppose we bring back to the idea of the garden. It started to become interesting. In the Chinese literature, we have a whole reach of a source of material based on this kind of garden, and one of the most famous one would be called the mirror garden. That's in Chinese we call 镜花园. In mirror garden, that it's quite interesting. Although it's hidden in this love story, but it's full with all this kind of political economy of desire within the novel. And of course, it also relates to the idea of a subjectivity. While the garden creates a scenario, it's not only this being look at this, But this being looked at is always surrounded by what's outside, what's the environment, and the notion of garden, I believe, has to be a configuration of mankind and nature. It's always like that. Huh? No matter it's a Western one, Western garden or Chinese garden, we always have this kind of utopia impulse toward the ideal relation to the nature, especially in Chinese garden. The guest is always wandering around in the garden and look at the mountain, look at the landscape, or the nature is miniaturized into a smaller object, and so on and so forth, which is quite interesting. In a way, although it's quite analog word, analog configuration of the nature, but still, I think somehow it still applies to the digitalization of the world nowadays, and especially in this performance, I think we use a lot of not so high-end technology to reconfigure this this basic issue regarding digital subjectivity, I would say. This is one of topic I think that you guys trying to refer here. But I'm pretty much.
Any comments or questions from audiences? Don't be shy.
I think.
It's fine.
Yeah, sure.
I guess my question was kind of about the politics of power that you see between yourselves and the audience, because I feel like there's this sort of like voyeuristic aspect where your eyes are obscured and you're engaging with the audience in a way where you can see us but we can't see you. And then at the same time, I feel like there's this aspect where we're taking something from you when we take pictures of your face, and you are kind of like captive to the performance, so you can't respond. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on sort of the politics of that.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really interesting question. Yeah, we even had a discussion before about like, when the audience, because between the two performances today, you were like, but should I tell them, like, should someone go over and say, don't do that? And we kind of thought, actually, for us, it's more interesting to see what happens when you tell people that they can actually move around the space and explore the space. So yeah, I think that it's always flicking between. It's sort of like, it's like the mirror flipping, like, these mirrors that we actually have, like, that they rotate, and those power dynamics, I think, swap a lot throughout the performance, because, of course, there's a power dynamic because we know what's going to happen, and where you sort of enter our space. But then the audience, especially this audience, there was quite a lot of people, so then you become powerful because you're such a large group and there's only two small little ones of us. And then it's, there can be a tension around, like, when we are trying to navigate our way through that, and there's, audiences either stay very close or they go, and move out of the way, or they even challenge that by sort of remaining really still, and because they have a question about, like, well, what if I stayed my ground really strongly, what will happen? And there's sort of, I think, throughout the duration of the performance, I think the audience becomes more curious about what would happen if I did this? And so they're already playing with this switching back and forth power dynamic. And then I think also, yes, there's our eyes are obscured. You maybe can't tell what we're looking at. But then there's this moment where Sue removes like my hat and my glasses, and actually in that moment I feel really like my face and my head is like really quite exposed for the first time, and it feels like in that moment also something switches. But yeah, I think there's. I think what we're also interested in is how people will behave given the conditions of this performance, and that includes like how we're able to navigate this crowd of people, and what will happen about that. And I think. Yeah, that we're always opening ourselves to like we're at the same we're very vulnerable because we're one person. Our bodies are exposed. Like people could, I don't know, do whatever. But then
I think there's something also, I don't know. I think it's quite interesting how still is like even I actually can see everything. It's just different color, great. But still, I'm still observing how the audience behave. But yeah, I think it's this power relation, as Ange says, is always shifting. But also what is interesting is this attention. I think we can choreograph the sight of eyesight of the audience, and then also even as a performer we can sense, okay, when this accumulation of attention building up, and that I think that part is also super interesting in this shifting constellation of our relation as a performer. And yeah, also like today there are several like unexpected reaction from the audience, which also like we can, yeah, we didn't respond directly, but actually we accommodate those different tension or different crowd, and I can also say energy in the space, and we adapt to that. And yeah, I think that's this power relation. What we're doing is actually we react to what we sense in the space. Yeah, we have our certain structure, but we also accommodate that at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would add that to answer your question about how we're approaching the politics of those power relations, we're approaching them as a question of observing each other's behavior rather than a kind of statement of like, you come into our space, we're in control, but more, or vice versa, or making ourselves either like extremely exposed or extremely powerful. But somehow our approach to that power relation is really through a question about when we're observing each other and everyone's being watched and everyone is performing, then what is that power relation? And that's the tension of the question that's present is more what we're interested in, I think. Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting that we are actually in a rehearsal room. We are in a rehearsal space. So by definition, every rehearsal takes a form of repetition. It's a repetition of a certain pattern over and over again. So of course I take it metaphorically. You know, I regard it as the digital culture that we have, or the cultural stereotype between gender and all of this kind of being look at this that is involved in your project. So well, actually, I would like to ask something really basic. How do you design your costume? That's one thing, and the second thing is the sound. You know, how is your sound design, and all of this I would like to know a little bit more. And of course, the dance move. How come it's so mechanical and so robotic in a way? Yeah. So yeah. It make me remind of some of the early sci-fi film. But anyway, it has all this kind of a retro element to it, which I think is fascinating. So I'd like to hear from you too.
The costumes we actually we arranged them in 2019. Actually, this skirt has a history. Maybe you can speak about this.
Yeah, I think, yeah. No, I think like this skirt I have for my university piece in 2009, and I have a I designed first character, and so I do a setting of a character, and yeah, my aunt helped me to make this dress for that character, and kind of recycle the not the character but the dress I have.
Yeah, it's sort of like bringing the past into the sort of present. I really like that it's like a pre-existing thing with its own history. And then the other things we put together, we're still, I think, very much thinking about the garden. So like the hats, the kind of, utility style goggles. These are like for wearing over your shoes when it's wet outside.
Running.
Which would, I can wear them from the studio. No, these are from, I can't remember where we got them, but I bought them in Taipei last time. But I like our footwear actually because it's the two types of footwear you'd wear in the mud. You'd either have bare feet or like fully covered boots. So there's these also like, I guess, clues for the type of environment that maybe we're stepping out of. And we kind of were liking this kind of hint towards a Baroque style thing because of the very kind of strong kind of imposing of like the garden through a kind of these sort of Baroque style gardens. Yeah, so we just actually, and then I love the cloud.
Yeah, it's from Shilin Night Market.
Yes, but in 2019, not now.
Yeah.
What was the other question?
Yeah, sound. Yeah, the sound is, we also do it in 2019. Yeah, I forgot how we came across that, but the sound which is quite present in the performance is in the earlier time with internet, we have to use modem to get connected to the internet, and that this certain sound which familiar to all of us.
Dial-up sound.
Yeah, dial-up sound. And we slowed it down for 700 something %. So it's like really distorted sound, but still uncanny familiar. Yeah, so yeah, I think there's certain sense of transmission and this, yeah, something from your memory or, yeah, reflective memory, you have that kind of memory through the sound, yeah.
And then we have these sort of bird sounds that are one of these like relaxing videos on YouTube, like 10 hours of garden bird sounds, which we also tried to stretch a little bit just so that you begin to hear the kind of digital lag of when the sound is slightly stretched. And then of course we have our voices when we're reading.
Yeah.
This
Like
sort
when
of
we are
karaoke
reading
style.
Yeah.
And our pace is really predetermined by the speed of the green coming across like a karaoke
and also
kind of.
it's streaming, so there's a transmission time happening, and then we are just sync to this transmission. Yeah. Time.
Yeah. So we were with the movement. I mean, with the choreography, we were thinking really like sort of within the space and how to really make these like pathways into the space, which would become our pathways, but also would determine where the audience could be or not. When I thought actually today was really great when we were walking down the middle and somehow suddenly the audience was split on two sides, which was, we had suddenly like made a really like clear pathway through the space. And then, I mean, there's lots of different choreography and different parts, and but I think you were referring to this one that's like that we do in unison, which is sort of we were referring to it in different ways, but for me, I think it's really this making clear through the body in space axes. So like the axis of X, Y, and Z, and these like really sort of producing these planes with the body that kind of imply like dimensionality and axes, and that then you can rotate an axis so that it can be slightly different and you see it from a different perspective. But then River, also when River saw it for the first time, he was like, oh, it looks like ritual, or it looks like yoga, or it looks like something. But then someone else said something that it looked like something else. So it also, I suppose people see what they know in it, which is also really interesting because it acts as its own sort of reflection of your own reading. But it's one of my favorite parts. It's so peaceful to do.
Also, I think I remember what there's one person say, that it feels like we are in a 3D model space, and then like we are turning this object like in the 3D model software, and then we kind of make clear what is the axis, XYZ axis of the space, and then we shift. So it's like we are, as if we are turning this space in the digital sphere. I just referred to one of the feedback we got, which is super interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. And that it can look like many things, but I feel that in that moment also the space of the room settles into this quite peaceful state. I think, the bird sounds are going, you've got this sort of crystalline bodies turning in unison with slight variation, and it always seems like such a peaceful moment that in my mind, I'm always like, oh, we made it to the virtual garden, like everyone's here. And so it feels very nice.
Yeah, also it's like throughout the sequence, we kind of, invite the audience to sense the space. So we actually also use, like, I see it as a choreography, as a way to activate different part of the space. So that moment when we are doing the dance is like really crystallized moment. The space is ready, and then we shift, we turn it around. Yeah.
And actually, in two of the runs, people somehow kind of need to understand it on their own bodies, which I find really interesting. Like, someone will be at the side, really, really watching, and then start to trying to start, like, because they're trying to understand it, and they can't understand it only through looking. They need to also understand it through their own embodiment. And this is, to me, super interesting because it's like another mirror has just arrived in the space.
Yes. So it becomes there's another plan, created there.
Of course, one of the function of mirror is mimicry. To copy from the. I still have one last question I want to ask. Is of course we as you refers to this Foucauldian idea of a power, ways of looking as definitely close related to the whole issue of power. And this Foucauldian panopticon situation is kind of manufactured here. So, so I'm really wondering if, of course, this garden cannot be a utopian one. It should be somehow dystopian in a sense. Are we the gardener of a dystopian garden, or I don't know? What do you think about today's media landscape in terms of the future development, and how whether it getting worse, or is it?
I think you mentioned a really interesting word before when you made the observation that we step into a rehearsal room. It's not a theatre. And it has all the signifiers of rehearsal room, like the mirrored wall and the ballet bar. You know, there's no seats, so it's clear you come inside and it's a space for rehearsal. And I think, in a way, this work feels like it has a sense of kind of ominousness or darkness, perhaps, as things unfold. But actually, I think, for me, it is, in some ways, the opposite, because it gives this space for rehearsing how to be together in this sort of panopticon space that we find ourselves in this mediated space we find ourselves in, where everyone is required to perform because everyone can be seen, and in this space of image circulation and this kind of like tension of this power dynamic between audience and performer, or between audience and audience, or all of that is going on, but actually the work maybe exists as a space where we can rehearse possibilities to be together in what would otherwise be quite dystopian. So in some ways, yes, the piece kind of reflects certain darknesses in the world that one could immediately relegate and categorize as bad. But in other ways, it provides a space to really question, to have an open question about how do we behave, what is the behavior between people in a space like this, and how do we rehearse that to produce something that would have an outcome where it's, you know, not that it's like utopian, because it's also not, but like the question remains, like, if we kept this in a space of rehearsal, how do we rehearse the processes of being together in a space that is as mediated as this one?
Yeah. Yeah, I think also just maybe refer to this notion of performance and how we came across like this seeing and being seen, or seeing through a camera. And I think it was in Adam 2018, and during the work, like during the artist lab, we have been filming all the time with camera, and that make us, yeah, like a reality show, and we are all like performance artists, and then it starts like, is this event like a performance, or everyone is perform, or like it's the presence of camera really shift the situation or condition, or change the condition. Yeah, and that's like really like how that part also led us to think that this relation of who is holding the camera and who is like seeing through the camera, and so I think it's also really important the role of the camera and in this relation of seeing and being seen. Yeah, and yeah, I agree with Ange, like you say about the rehearse and this thinking, and I think it's also through, it's still a construction of the space and our movement and relation with the audience, but it's also like at the same time we are part of it, and also we are reacting and experimenting or rehearse with the different situation, but at the same time we reveal, I think, everything, like the backstage and the role of the equipment and technology is everything, it's transparent. And like, for example, also the audience, yeah, I think it's quite interesting, they also came back to the mirror wall and seeing us. So yeah, I think this part of this notion of rehearse and thinking through rehearse, thinking with rehearsal is also really interesting for us.
Well, tomorrow you have another rehearsal as the last rehearsal temporarily. Yeah, right. Thank you for being with us. So tomorrow we have another show. If you pretty much like this digital garden, please spread word for us. And this weekend we have also many different performance programs around this Taipei Performing Arts Center, including Miss from Filipino performance artist Josh Serafin, and also another Unclouded by Tao Meiyun and Chen Wukang, and also many others. I forgot. Thank you, and hopefully see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, River. Thanks,
Yeah, thank you to Angela, Sue, and Hong-John. Thank you.